Welcome back to So Bad It's Good. Today we have a returning guest to the podcast. Now, I already love this dude, but I was re-listening to one of his podcast episodes from a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know if you guys have heard about this Vanderpump Rules thing, this Sandoval Ariana thing. And you guys know, I shoot from, and especially with this situation, there's a lot of anger tied up in it for me because I really idolized Tom Sandoval in this way. That I sometimes will attach myself to a male that I think is like superhuman and is like, really doing everything and firing on all cylinders. So there's a lot of anger towards myself because I really had this wild man crush on Tom Sandoval. So I will sometimes come at it from this angry kind of semi-humorous point of view. But I was re-listening to our next guest's podcast. It was released a couple of weeks ago, actually. It's an hour and 45 minutes, but this is like a banger of a podcast. This goes in from such a different angle because our next guest is an intuitive and an empath. And he takes a psychospiritual look at like Real Housewives, Vanderpump Rules, all of it. But what I keep coming back to is in the intro of his podcast on Sandoval, he was talking about holding space for everybody. Is that, even, like I think this is an abhorrent thing that these two people did, and especially against somebody that a lot of us really love, Ariana, but to hold space. So, he has this gift where he's able to drop in on people and kind of like explain it in a different way or be able to look at it from a different angle. And I'm always game to look at something from a different angle because I genuinely like trying to understand, and we've got an expert with us that I think can help us potentially understand a little bit better. So if you have not subscribed or listened to Deep Dive with Jaime Stein, I need you to do that right now. You can start at the March 18th episode entitled Sandoval. I'm telling you, this is something very different that you're not going to get with a lot of our other podcasts of us out here doing our thing, which I love too, but this was so refreshing to listen to. And so we are so honored to have him back with us today. So Jaime Stein from Deep Dive with Jaime Stein, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. It's so fun and exciting to be here with you.
Now Jaime's funny because I'm kind of a hermit, and Jaime's one of the only people that will text me to be like, hey, do you want to go to Schwartz and Sandy's? And I'm like, and by the way, before this, I was like, heck yeah, I'm back and forth in Arizona a lot, but I definitely want to do that. And Jaime, I don't know if we're going to do Schwartz and Sandy's now. I'm not sure.
Well, we can, but by the way, I am a hermit too, so it is not a common thing that I send out texts as such, but I feel like, I wanted to go to Schwartz and Sandy's, and I enjoy connecting with you, and it felt like a perfect fit. But I feel like we could go to Something About Her if you want to. That could be
let's go enjoy a sandwich, and then we can walk down to Sir, the Abbey, Tom. There's so many places to choose from where we can get a beverage.
Well, wait a sec. Tom is the same thing as going to Schwartz and Sandy's. So if Schwartz and Sandy's...
Kind of, Jaime, but the more you watch the show, the more you realize how little they have to do with Tom, that they're figureheads, if anything. And right. So can you explain to the people that have not heard you on this before or don't listen to your podcast a little bit about your gift and what you do? Because you don't only just do this podcast. This is like a full-time job. You're out there working with people in the field, boots on the ground. How do you describe to a newcomer what you do? Or what your gift is?
Yeah, the concise way that I explain it is that I have an ability to drop into people's unconscious landscapes and to bring into consciousness any blocks they may have to the things they want in life. So if you are someone who subscribes to the idea that we're co-creating our own realities and that everything outside of us is in some way either a reflection of our internal landscape or somehow an invitation for us to get to know ourselves better in this lifetime, it stands to reason then that there's something in us that has an investment in everything that we're creating, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what I'm able to do is to drop underneath that conscious layer into the unconscious, into the part of you that might be saying no to romance, no to financial abundance, no to creative flow, and where that comes from in you and why. And then by bringing it into the light of consciousness, we can support you to work with it and to sort of go towards whatever your work is to do again in this lifetime to create the things that you want.
Now you actually do this with real people, but it's got to be like a playground to then take these abilities and start talking about Housewives or Vanderpump Rules characters, because I believe it's such a rich playground in ways to drop in on these really extreme personalities, and then also to then walk an audience through, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm sensing underneath this is what the force that I feel. Is that why you're drawn to reality television, is because of the extreme characters?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this before, but this all unfolded so organically. I never had a plan. I was never like, okay, let me figure out my niche, to use, a business schooling lingo, and okay, I'm going to be the empath who does the Real Housewives. It was never.
Could you imagine if that was your path? Like, could you imagine if that was like, I knew this 15 years ago that I would be an empath talking about reality television? Yeah.
Well, it's working for. I mean, it's a brilliant business strategy. I just can't take credit for it because I didn't consciously design it. I mean, it really was just by virtue of having a chance encounter with Casey Wilson at a coffee shop. She invited me on the bit sesh, unbeknownst to me, because she was touched by I gave her an intuitive message when I ran into her. I said, hey, yeah. I listen to Bit Sesh. I'm a big fan. I have an intuitive message for you if you want to hear it. She did. She was touched by it. She brought me on to Bit Sesh and was like, give us your reads on the Housewives. From that, people just started following me. And then I started getting invited onto other podcasts. And from that, I had people saying, you should have your own podcast. When are you going to have your own podcast? So I just kind of kept showing up to what was here. So I do like to clarify, I never intended this, and I didn't quite know why it was happening. Now, having said that, now that I'm in it, what I'm learning about it, what I love about it, is that yes, to me, it's a very fun, accessible, and unpretentious way to get into really deep psychospiritual issues. And I think what's amazing to me and what I love about it and what I'm grateful for is that I can literally create content where I'm just talking about Luann de Lesseps or Ashley Darby or Sandoval. And then the messages that I get from people being like, by listening to your podcast, I'm learning about myself. I'm learning I have the right to take up space. I'm learning I have the right to my anger. I've never been to therapy, but I kind of, realize X, Y, and Z about myself. So for me, I'm kind of like, this just feels like such a perfect fit because I am a pop culture fan. I do love reality TV. I love storytelling. I hate pretentiousness. So to be able to talk about these shows and I think find a deeper meaning in them, which look, I get that's not everyone's bag of chips, which is great. But what I do know now from doing what I do is there are a lot of very smart, spiritual, sensitive people who do watch these shows. And I think like to engage with it on that deeper human level. I mean, these are the myths of our time, whether we like it or not. These are our current myths. And so for me, to take something that's in the collective consciousness that gets typically disregarded as trash or shallow, and to be able to use it to like navigate these deeper realms and to bring something to people that maybe they wouldn't otherwise be getting, in their lives in terms of their own introspection and navigating their own inner lives. I think it's kind of fun and beautiful.
Well, yeah, I mean, you bring up this, they're kind of our superheroes in a way. I always think about gods and monsters and that you can deviate like superheroes from that, but housewives and reality stars, they're a form of superheroes in a certain sense. And I want to just make a quick detour really quick to talk very briefly is that you back in the day even worked on The Real World.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I just had Trishelle on today and we talked about that because I watched Real World Las Vegas on Netflix and, but like that is I remember you talking about a couple of seasons and I was on your podcast a long time ago talking about one of the Real World Homecoming seasons. And that was very interesting to even just see the progression of reality television and what we were covering back then and what we're covering now and how it's being covered. Like now you go back and watch some of those Real World seasons and you're like, this is heavy because it's presented in such a different way than it's presented now on Bravo with the glossiness, even quicker edits than Real World. I mean, do you see that a lot? I mean, it's always just people at the end of the day. But in terms of watching it yourself from your third eye, is it wild to watch how I always think it's like reality shows on steroids these days. Do you agree with that? Or do you think it's kind of always been the same?
No, no. Oh, no, it's evolving for sure. And first of all, I just want to say, isn't Trishelle awesome?
Dude, she was. I mean, there, when you talk to somebody and this, it's like you can tell when somebody wants to be there, when somebody doesn't want to be there. And that doesn't mean they're mean, but like she was so engaging. She was so fun. She was so game. I even said, like, listen, you have edit control. I'm not here for like a gotcha podcast. And she's like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Yeah. She's like, ask me anything that you want. And she was just the best. And it really filled me up for the rest of the week last week because I was such a fan of her season in particular and her. And I had forgotten, like she had reminded me about how much discourse there was even kind of, slut shaming her after that season. And I had forgotten about how much heat she had gotten. And when you watch it back, it is so tame. And that's why I think even could compare it with Sandoval is that I think this is something that kind of shook us again of like how real some of these things are and how intense and the pain that this is causing and the stuff that all of these characters are going through. It really snaps you back because sometimes I've been struggling to find the meaning lately, Jaime, and to find holding space for everybody because everything seems kind of it just seems kind of like a structured reality lately in terms of these shows. So this kind of snapped me out of it. And that's why it was so nice to go back to the real world and go, wow, it just made me feel like a kid again, watching these people and watching it before it got the bravofication of reality television.
Yeah, it was great because I literally just hung out with her a few months ago in New Orleans.
Yeah, I told her, and she talked about Arissa. She talked about Arissa living with her, like you told me.
I know, literally, Arissa's been living. I mean, Arissa did move out, but yeah, they were living together, and it was just, I never knew. I was never close. So for I guess people at home, for context, I became really close friends with Arissa after working on Real World Vegas. So I've known her for many years now. And then I happened to be in New Orleans, and she was staying with Trishelle, so I got the opportunity to hang out with Trishelle. And as someone who worked on that show, I mean, this is like 20 years ago now.
Yeah,
and to your
2002.
point, I remember who she was on that show, and just to see how, I mean, I don't want to sound patronizing, but just to see it, she's just come into her own so beautifully. It was such a pleasure to hang out with her. She was so smart, so funny, so
her voice had even changed, Jaime. Her voice was so light on that season, like in terms of like, hey, I'm Trishelle, and her voice dropped in. She was like, hey, what's like, I mean, I was like, and that's what's always so impressive too, to watch, if you're the graph of your life of how you've changed and how life has changed you. I was like, wow, this is like, she's really come into this really solid person that you see on that show of somebody that is not insecure necessarily, but trying to find their way in the world. And they're so young. So they're getting all of these things coming at them and deciding what's good for them. And you can see on the other side, I'm like, wow, she's like a really solid person, it seems.
Yeah, and I remember when you did come on my podcast to talk about Homecoming LA, I remember you were in a little bit, I mean, I think slightly humorous despair about looking at people like Beth, for example, and coming to the conclusion of, do people change? Is change possible? So, I love to look at someone like Trishelle and also Arissa, where you see, oh, wow, no, change is very much possible. And these are people who have become happy functioning adults who.
But you really make the point, if they're open to it, they can. People can change if they're open to change, and I think that's the push pull of reality television, is that you have those people willing to change, but you have a really large contingent of people that are so set in their ways. I was just watching Girls Trip with like Candace and Portia. These people that are like, no, I'm right. This will always be right. And nobody is going to tell me otherwise. And I always think that's such an interesting stance to take. Like it's instantly iconic in some ways to the viewer, but after repeated seasons, even Jax Taylor, we always said, I'm a work in progress. I'm a work in progress. And it's like, are you putting in the work to make any progress, dude?
Yeah, well, and we'll get there, but it's interesting because I think about that in terms of Tom Sandoval and the choices he's making now, and feeling like this is a guy who's kind of been at a threshold, who could have made other choices, and looking at the choices he's making, and I'm like you, I've always liked Sandoval, and I always felt things in him that I really appreciated, that to be honest, I still do. And it's difficult. It's difficult to watch someone who has the opportunity to choose one path and instead go down another path. But just to circle back around to what you were saying earlier, I really am getting the feeling that I think we're hitting a saturation point. My prediction is I think we're in the last 2, maybe 3 years of the heyday of Real Housewives type reality programming, because I feel like it's getting so meta at this point. Like I was just thinking about how even Girls Trip, right? Like they're filming Salt Lake City season 4 right now, right? So as that's filming, Girls Trip Thailand is airing. And I have to imagine that Heather and Whitney watching what's playing out on Girls Trip is now going to affect what's happening on Salt Lake City. Meanwhile, you've got Beverly Hills filming. They're bringing back, I mean, Kim.
Everybody.
I mean, it's like everyone. And then Megan King Edmonds is there as well. And I think I even saw something about, Cynthia Bailey's there as well. And I'm just watching this kind of metaverse. I mean, as a fan, it's exciting because there's all this amazing material out right now. And obviously Bravo's breaking down the fourth wall. And so as kind of like a reality TV super fan, there's something kind of really exciting about it. But I do kind of feel this energy underneath it where I don't quite know where we go from here. And even with Sandoval, right? It's like this affair is making the show. So from where I'm standing, there's no way you have a season 11 without at least Tom Sandoval there. But at the same time, how is this group going to film? You know, I mean, it's such a fractured cast at this point. So I just kind of feel like, yes, it has evolved, certainly from the days of the Real World. And I want to say, as someone who worked on the Real World back in the day, they truly, I mean, it, beyond the general construct and framework of what they've set up of 7 strangers living in a house and working together, they didn't touch it. There was no manipulation. There was no feeding lines. There was no, okay, you guys are going to have lunch now and you're going to talk about this and you're going to talk about that. It was nothing. It was truly, those kids were living in that space and what they did instead was up to them. Obviously, we've gotten very far away from that now, and I think that I do.
Yeah, we've really strayed from God's light now.
So I think we're reaching a saturation point where the bubble is going to pop, and then we'll see. I mean, I'm curious to see what the next incarnation of reality TV is, because I don't think it's going anywhere, but I don't think where we're at can sustain itself because it's like a monster that's eating its own tail. It's becoming so meta, so self-reflexive, so about its own place in pop culture that I'm just feeling like there's nowhere else for this to go.
Yeah. You're right. The monster eating its own tail is so dead on. And even think about what we do. Like, we've now spawned all these cottage industries of us, podcasters, of intuitives, of all of these things. And like you said, like, you know, we these shows now wear that badge of pop culture so proudly, which is amazing. But at some point, you're right, the saturation level is so intense. And when I was watching Whitney and Heather on Girls Trip, you know, you obviously see that Whitney and Heather have been raised on Housewives. They're fans of the show. Like, Heather salivates hanging out with these people. Like, she's like, oh my God, I'm with All Stars right now. Like, and sometimes that even gets annoying because I just want people I want to see real behavior on television. And to bring it back to Sandoval again, we haven't even seen these episodes play out, but this is real behavior. This is like, whoa, you're talking 10 seasons in, something this dark and big happens. Now, you and your co-host for that episode, Piper, you know, you were really making such amazing points. And I want to talk about a couple of these, but I really strongly suggest you guys go listen to that full episode and subscribe to the podcast. But, you know, talking about holding space, you know, you never really, you know, there is so much going on with everybody. And that is a good note for me to take. But you did say, and your guest said, there is, when you drop in on there is a darkness there. There is almost a feeling of Raquel and Tom not pulling one over on Ariana, but almost an anger towards Ariana in a certain sense.
Oh, for sure. A misdirected rage. Yeah, and I want to be clear because I think sometimes people get a little confused about my intention. For me, I'm just speaking for me. Everyone has their own perspective. Holding space for someone's humanity and vulnerability and seeking to understand why they do what they do, for me, that is not mutually exclusive from also deeply recognizing destructive behavior and saying this isn't okay. So I want to be clear, and I hope I was clear about this in the podcast. Yeah, what Tom and Raquel did, I mean, no question, it was destructive. I think I said on the podcast that particular flavor of dressing up in disguises, dressing up as Raquel for Halloween, kind of flaunting it right under Ariana's nose. To me, there's something very disturbing about it. There's something that's kind of
there's
sick about it.
a cruelty almost.
For sure, there's a cruelty, and I do feel from Tom in particular. I've always felt, even when I liked him, I've always felt there's this real push-pull relationship when it comes to women. And I just always get this feeling from him, if I'm right, about somehow feeling fucked with or set up by women and sort of played with in a way that's not quite fair, and that there's sort of an underground rage there and a voice saying, like, don't fuck with me and don't fuck with my heart. And in this place where he experienced, some experience of manipulation, some experience of being tricked, set up, gaslit, there's something in him that's saying, like, you got one over me, I'm going to get one over on you. And I just can't help but feel with Ariana in that relationship. Look, there's obviously a lot of information we weren't getting. I think they were hiding a lot from the cameras in terms of whatever problems they were going through. Yeah. Hopefully, we're going to get more insight into this as Sandoval unfolds. But I just get this feeling for Tom that it was kind of like, I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying my sense of his experiences, I thought this relationship was going to be one thing. It turned out to be another. And if he follows that unconsciously, you tricked me. And now I'm pissed about this. And I think in this place where there's something historical there, where he's got some established relationship to feeling fucked with by women. Because the thing is, as you know, I'm always looking at pattern. I think we recreate early patterns over and over, hopefully as a way to heal them. So, the most simple example of that is, oh my God, I keep dating my father. Or, oh my God, no matter how many times I try to find a new job, I end up in the same kind of abusive work situation. We have this way of recreating these patterns. And so, you go back and you look at the history of Tom on Vanderpump Rules, and I'm just remembering, like, the whole deal with Kristen, where she, because I've been rewatching it, I forgot about this whole aspect where he had cheated on her, right, early on with a waitress in Vegas, which that, if you go back and listen, she says what was part of what was so painful is he didn't just screw her one time drunkenly. It was a 2-day affair where he did it repeatedly and he knew what he was doing. That was just interesting to me because I was like, oh, here it is. It's like a little microcosm of what he's going to do 10 years later with a 7-month-long emotional affair. But what was so interesting to me about it was Kristen then kind of like lords that over him and is sort of punishing him for it all season. And then part of the insanity of her having cheated with Jax is she was hiding her own cheating while kind of like pointing a finger at him the whole time. So, while it doesn't excuse Tom's cheating, of course, that's his responsibility. You see this kind of pattern or flavor of she was fucking with him. She was fucking with him. And I just go back to Tom's, there are things that he says through over the years that to me are just such clues to what's going on with him psychologically, where he says to Katie, for example, you get to have whatever feelings you want. But if I have feelings, I'm a psycho. Or, saying to Ariana, like, women can get away with anything, but if I do it as a straight guy, like, I get penalized for it. Again, I'm not saying he's right.
As a cisgendered man.
Exactly. Yeah. It gives you a glimpse, though, into, what I would call the flavor of the original wound. I just feel like this is a guy who somewhere early on, I get very drawn to his strong firefighter mother who we've seen on camera kind of poke him
Big Mickey Rourke hands, he said.
I just kind of get this feeling that there was some point early on where he genuinely was screwed with in a way that was unfair. And he didn't have space for his rage. He didn't have space for his boundaries. He didn't have room to say, wait a second, this doesn't feel good. It's not fair to me. And instead, I just think that story about women get away with everything. They get to treat guys however they want, and you just have to roll over and take it. I think it's where it got internalized. and you see him unconsciously playing it out over and over and over. And I think that's what's going on. So in a way, it's not personal towards Ariana because I think it's his history. But yes, do I think there was a part of him unconsciously that was like, I'm messing with you because I feel like you mess with me? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and you said in dropping in on him a little, there's so much going on in him, and you actually had made this point too of like there was an excitement in him, and you kind of attributed it to his band. You thought those feelings, you were like, oh, he must just really be, like really into like Tom Sandoval and the Most Extras. That must just be such a passion project. But now you're looking back on that feeling you initially had and think, wow, maybe it actually has to do with this Raquel situation as well. But, even that aside, you said there is so much going on inside of him.
Yeah, I think he's look, I think I stand by the things I've always appreciated about him. I think he's a complicated, interesting, multifaceted guy with a lot of creative energy that wants to move through him, and even a lot of love that wants to move through him. You said something that was really interesting to me on social media where you were talking about how before you kind of loved his band and you thought it was fun and exciting.
Yeah.
And now that we've walked through this doorway with it, now to you it just looks so cheesy. And I so related to that because I was the same way where before, because there was so much I liked about him, I was looking at a lot of this stuff through almost an endearing lens. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's cheesy.
Yes.
But, I love his spirit. I love,
yes.
And now I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, it looks completely different to me. But even that, like to me, the way I think of it, it's almost like, those drawings where you look at it from one angle and it's an old woman, but then you look at it from another angle and it's a young girl. And I'm like, again, I just look at the pattern in everything, and I think there's information in everything. So when I take in like yours and mine, and I have to imagine a lot of people's experience of Sandoval, of he's the same guy. We were seeing him one way, now we're seeing him a completely different way. I'm like, this is part of Tom's potential magic. I just think he's this guy who, if he were willing to let go of his anger or work through it, let's say, if he were willing to come out of secrecy, if he were willing to surrender this deep withholding that he has and actually show up to life in a way that's more constructive and of service to himself and others, I just have this feeling he's this guy. Like he feels like a magician to me. He is a performer. And I think that he's someone who, at his in his best version of himself, I think he could probably invite people into what I might call the mystery of life. You think something looks one way, let's walk through a doorway, and now, surprise, you're seeing it the complete other way. And isn't that kind of magical and exciting?
Oh, he's very Alice through the looking glass. You were saying Tom could potentially, I was saying, take you through that looking glass. In fact, yeah. I mean, I've done mushrooms with Tom, and like I've had like some really great experiences. And that's the hard thing, Jaime, is that like I get that everybody makes mistakes, and this is a bad on me, but when you idolize somebody, it really crushes you because you want to think of them as the perfect person, and that's just not reality. But also the cruelty aspect of this, because I do love Ariana so much and have known her even before Tom. That was the part that I just, the 7 months, the planning, the teasing, the having the, and they might have a real affinity, Raquel and Tom, for each other. That's up to them to, this just can't be a great way to start any of this. But if you're saying that we keep repeating the same patterns in life and hopefully we will learn from them and grow, if you were working with Tom Sandoval in what you do, how would you help him face what his obvious patterns seem to be?
Like post Sandoval, like if I were working with him
right now. Said, Jaime, I heard you on the pod. You seem like you hold space for me. You seem like you'll talk to me. What am I doing wrong? How do I approach my life at this point?
Well, I think there are two things. First things first. One, getting him in touch. If I'm right about this, getting him in touch with the cruelty, getting him in touch with the part of him that was saying, you know what? Yeah, like I wanted, on a certain level to rub her face in something. I wanted to play this out. I took pleasure in it. I was pissed. I wanted to punish her, and really giving him the space to own that voice, to bring it into consciousness so he can start to understand where this has come from inside of him. Because that's the thing. It's a voice that's calling out to be healed. There is a voice in him saying, I want to punish the woman who fucked with me. Again, if I'm right about this. So we need to kind of.
Well, I guess we need to think though is how Ariana fucked with him though. How are and when you drop into Ariana, what do you sense there and how that computes with Tom Sandoval?
Well, again, I'm not saying he's right in his perception.
No.
Right.
Yeah. No, I understand that we can feel certain.
Right.
By the way, I also talk to the audience all the time is that we're the heroes in our own lives. We don't usually think of ourselves as villains. We don't think of ourselves.
Right.
We don't really, unless you're really insecure, you don't go around thinking that you are the worst person in the world. Right. Tom, even at this point, and you guys talked about this, that Tom and Rick, there isn't this sense of that they did something really wrong.
I think maybe he thinks he has to say that for the public face. I don't get the sense he thinks he really did something wrong. I don't think he can let himself know that because, then it will take him into these deeper feelings of the vulnerability of why he's doing what he's doing. I think,
But you're right, dude. I've talked to people around. You're right. He does seem to have that, not really. He seems to be in a fog of not really knowing what the big, why this is such a big deal.
Because you have to understand, if I'm right about what I'm picking up on him, he feels misunderstood. Take Sandoval out of it. I think generally, big picture, he feels misunderstood. And I think in his mind, I'm trying. And again, things get turned around on me. So it's in his mind, right, he's doing something because he got screwed with. He's misunderstood. And now because I made, again, from Tom's point of view, one mistake, I'm going to be the bad guy. You know what I mean? But, to go back to your question, again, look, we have very limited info about their relationship. But if I had to guess the tone of it or the flavor of it, what I go back to is, he got out of this relationship with Kristen. And Ariana was very much presented as, the trophy. She was the right fit, the right match. She was the cool girl. She was the one who had it all together. She was the opposite of Kristen, right? She was the one he was supposed to be with. Cool, down to earth, sane, sexy. I even remember Ariana kind of saying, I'm prettier than you, I'm cooler than you, and I'm smarter than you. And we all celebrated it. We were like, oh, great. Tom and Ariana are supposed to be together. They're the couple of the year.
Yeah.
And, we know from what Ariana has shared, we know there's been some mental health issues. We know there's been, feeling sexually shut down. It seems like she's really been in a deep process. And so I can imagine, let's just say hypothetically, if Tom kind of thought, wait a second, I thought this was going to be one thing. I thought this was going to be kind of the match of the century where we're meeting each other and we're having great sex and we both want kids and we both want, or whatever it is. And then sort of finds himself in a relationship, the honeymoon phase ends, let's say. And let's say it's a different story. And maybe that's a place where he feels kind of wait a second, there's a bait and switch here. Wait a second, we're not having sex anymore. Wait a second, you're in bed all day and you're depressed. Wait a second. And, Tom, I think he's someone who does have a relationship to being the good boy. So let's say there's a part of him that does have feelings of resentment about that, but he's kind of disowning it. And instead he's trying to tend to her. He's trying to do all the right things, but he's disowning something in himself that's maybe saying, wait a second, what about my needs? Wait a second, I'm disappointed. Wait a second, this doesn't work for me. And if he's not articulating that and he's suppressing it and meanwhile trying to be sort of the good boy on the surface, that anger is just going to kind of swell and swell and swell and grow and grow and grow. So that's
and there's also a part of him. There's a part of him that's also saying, I'm so special. I'm so special. I think so highly of myself that why are these things, why am I not potentially getting sex as much as I want? I'm so special in my, who I am. I'm very unique. Why aren't I getting everything that I want? And I feel like that opens the door into somebody like Raquel.
Yeah, exactly. And there is, this word gets so overused at this point, but I think, yes, there's absolutely kind of a narcissistic bend to Tom. He's interesting because there's a deep generosity in him, but there's also this deep self-obsession in him too. So I can imagine, yeah, layered on top of all of this, if and again, I do not know what was going on in their relationship, but hypothetically, if things are orienting towards Ariana and sort of what she needs sort of in her struggles and difficulties, and then you've got this kind of man-child, Peter Pan, who wants a lot of the attention and wants a lot of it to be about him, and he feels like he's not getting that. It just sort of becomes a clusterfuck, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it does seem like a clusterfuck that really exploded, even though, we don't really know behind the scenes what was leading up to this. And like you said, hopefully we will see. And I know we do see in the next couple of episodes some cracks in that armor. But to then bring in Raquel to this, because a lot of people have really interesting reactions to Raquel because we've watched her now since 2018 on this show, and we've watched her, and if this hadn't have exploded, this would have been an underdog season where she would have come out looking so amazing, and we would have really rooted for her like we choose people to root for in reality shows. That's one of the tenets of a reality show. But now with this, it kind of sweeps a lot of that under the rug, and people's reactions are so extreme, myself included. But then you have this other undercurrent of, well, Tom is manipulating her. He is telling her, he's putting all the thoughts in her head. When you drop in on somebody like Raquel, what's the feeling there? What do you pick up? Because she's been in with DJ James Kennedy. We've seen her, like you mentioned in your episode, that first episode on the date with Peter, where she breaks down, not knowing where she is in her life, what she's doing. Speak to that.
I mean, I think there's sort of layers upon layers. I think that, so first of all, I'm a big believer in self-responsibility. And I think that, as a culture, that's why I sort of get a little skeptical of everyone diagnosing everyone else a narcissist. It's like, Raquel, look, she's a big girl and she made her own choices. And I'm not saying that Sandoval wasn't in some way impressionable, but just in the same way that, Tom can't blame Ariana for his decision not to be honest about what was going on for him in their relationship. Raquel can't really blame Sandoval. I feel like with Raquel, my sense of her, it's almost like, you see someone like Lala, for example, who I experience deep down as having a lot of terror. I think she has a lot of terror, and I think she covers for that terror.
Yes.
With big, blustery,
yes.
I'm calling it like I see it. I'm the voice of moral authority. I stick up for what's right.
I love dicks. I want dicks. Here's my put. Like, it's a very Erica Jane kind of like very extreme, but you're totally right. That's what I pick up on too, is that there seems to be so much fear there.
Yeah. And so you see this a lot, right? Especially on the Housewives. It's like women or people who I think cover for a deeper vulnerability with like a real competitive cutthroat edge where it's like, you're not going to see me be quote unquote weak. Like Erica Jane's a perfect example. Like she never, like, you're not going to see me when I'm down. I've got this pride, right?
Yes.
And I've got this sense of competition. I think that Raquel actually has that in her. I think she's deeply competitive. I think there's something powerful in her that wants to win. And so it's almost like that's maybe a more foundational archetype for her. But my sense, so there's the deeper vulnerability in Raquel of whatever that kind of competition's covering. Then I think there's that competitive spirit in Raquel. But then I think the difference between a Raquel and a Lala or an Erica Jane is that somewhere along the way, she learned she couldn't even have that competitive spirit directly. So it's like that had to get covered underneath the kind of doe-eyed, willowy girl who can barely string a sentence together. So, I guess in some ways, maybe she and Tom are kind of right for each other in the sense that there's complexity there. I think there's complexity there. And I think for someone like Raquel, first she would have to get down into the Lala in her, like the voice in her that says, actually, I play to win. Actually, like, I'm deeply competitive. Actually, there's something in me. Because people are asking, like, why doesn't she ever cry? Why does it look like she's smiling in these interviews?
And by the way, we hear that she does not cry at the reunion at all. We got that information this week. Sheena said on her podcast that she did not cry or Lala said she didn't cry one time.
That's what I'm saying. I think there's something in Raquel that's playing to win. But again, I feel like she could never show that. So,
but Jamie, how can the body not manifest. Like when somebody's playing to win, I always usually think the body follows, the voice follows. There's and Raquel reads very not confident. Her voice is quivery. Her voice, at certain times she drops in on it, but also you make that great point of she's been obsessed with Lala. I mean, obsession might not be the word, but she's been very interested in Lala liking her. We've seen that in the past with the Bambi-eyed bitch comment, but it's very interesting to think about that thought of that they are so similar.
Yeah, they went axe throwing. She was the only one. She threw the axe. She got a bullseye. And I remember thinking it because I'd already sensed in her. I was like, I think there's more power in her than she lets on. And I remember when she threw that axe and she got that bullseye. Speaking about the body, I mean, that to me was an example of Raquel just got that bullseye. But then also, there have been other examples of it. Just even in her relationship with James, like she did ultimately give him that ultimatum of like, look, stop drinking or I'm out. Or this season, when we think about them in Vegas, that moment where Lala said to her, I wouldn't trust you drunk around my man. And it was just so interesting to me because I was feeling into Raquel in that moment. And I felt how that comment, like it hit her, like it had an impact on her. And you watched her, it was like she was stumbling for her words, right? But then what did she say? We all know. She said, well, it's a good thing you don't have a man around for me to be around. That was like cutting comment. And so when I took that in, I was like, again, also in Havasu, when she left, she couldn't leave without saying to
She
Lala,
said, I won. I got Oliver and you didn't. And that's why you're upset, which, by the way, I still believe to this day, Raquel was completely right. Like, two things can be true at once. Like Raquel could have been doing this, but like Raquel was right. And that's why I think the interesting relationship with Lala and Lala's adverse react. Lala now thinks she's like a prognosticator. She's like Nostradamus. Like I knew I had a vibe and I knew Sandoval and Raquel were bad. And to me, that's just like showman, like BS when it's like Lala's felt threatened from Raquel in a lot of ways over time.
well, I think the thing about Lala, I think there's two things about Raquel. One, I've always felt that there's a part of Lala that just has a thing for James Kennedy. And so I think the fact that Raquel was with James Kennedy, because obviously back then, Lala could never let herself be with a James Kennedy because he wasn't the rich guy who was going to gift her with Range Rovers, right? But they were such a match in spirit. And so then I think to see Raquel with James Kennedy, but not just the fact that she was with James Kennedy, but to what we're talking about, to see if Lala is someone who's basically saying on an unconscious level, I can't afford to be helpless. Like I have to puff up my chest. I have to get myself through life because something in me is terrified of what happens if I drop the ball or drop my guard. To see someone like Raquel, who's embodying essentially a kind of helplessness, a kind of like, I'm just the lost damsel in distress that Lala will never let herself be. And then this is the woman who gets to be with James. I just feel like it was triggering her on a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
But coming back to Raquel, like there are these signs where you see, even though there is this kind of learned helplessness that I think she felt she had to adopt for what, like she had to disown her more powerful energy, you still see the more powerful energy struggling to break through. So I want to be clear when I talk about her being like that there's layers, I'm not seeing Raquel as like a Machiavellian villain who's twirling her mustache thinking, I'm secretly competitive, but I'm going to play a part. I think she's very confused. And I think there is warring aspects inside of her. So I think there is this deeply competitive part of her that wants to win. And I think she learned really early on that I'm not allowed to have this energy all the way. And I think, one of the things I'll bring in that people have been DMing me a lot about, and I think about a lot, is her origin story. And the fact that, again,
are you talking about being adopted? Are you talking about the adoption and the...
I didn't want her. I mean, let's just call it literally, that's what she said. It's like my bio mom didn't want me. I was a mistake. She gave me to her sister. I don't know where her bio dad is in all of this. The way that Raquel talks about it, she talks about it in a way where it sounds like she's okay with everything and everything's well adjusted. But I know from working with people, that kind of message, I don't know how this was held by her family. I don't know when she was told whose child she actually was. I don't know, to what degree there were secrets kept. I don't know what the type of narrative that got organized around it. But just honestly, being a child who wasn't wanted by your biological mother, that in and of itself is something that can definitely leave a mark, even if nothing is ever said overtly. I just have to imagine, like, as I'm saying this, I can imagine a situation, perhaps hypothetically, where Raquel feels almost like, okay, my family that's raising me is doing me a favor. I don't have the right to make a scene. I don't have a right to rock the boat. I don't have a right to have strong, powerful energy because I wasn't wanted and they took me in. So I better do and say all the right things to not rock the boat. You know what I mean? So that could be a place where she learned, if I have strong, powerful energy where I actually want to play to win, I better keep that under wraps because I don't want to jeopardize what I've got going. Because to the child's perspective, that could jeopardize my ability to survive. You know what I mean? If I piss these people off. So, it's complicated.
Well, do you think, I mean, so when you're dealing with that, does that also potentially, if, your birth mom did not want you, your bio mom did not want you, does that set then an eternal competition for the rest of your life to be wanted by people, to be their choice? And somebody like Tom, who potentially is presented in this positive light of, look what a ray of light he is to all of his friends. Because I've been around, like, I was at Coach, like, he's one of those guys that wants everybody to party, wants everybody to, like, be having fun. And Raquel sees this and he's like, wow, what a great guy that brings everybody together. And maybe that is, one of the things that she was so attracted by, of like, wow, everybody wants a piece of Tom. What if Tom wanted a piece of me? I mean, I know I'm probably reaching in some ways here, but also the competition aspect of even regarding her beauty pageant stuff. You know, like, there's so much even in that. Like, it really is fascinating to think about, but it's hard because I keep coming back to just immense anger, because I just think it's just that cruelty thing I can't get over, because I saw, like, that's the other thing. And I think you mentioned this in your pod about the blankness, or I think Piper had picked up on just this blankness. And that was always how I had described Raquel, like, very nice, very blank. I really couldn't have like a really deep conversation with her, nor, like, what am I going to do that on a Coachella field? But, other people you can have really quick, you can read them really quickly, or they're open to a sense. And she wasn't closed. She was just blank. And I keep going back to that. But also the friendship she had with Ariana aside from Tom. Like, this wasn't like where it was just her and Tom and Ariana all three hanging out. Like, no, her and Ariana had a very personal friendship as well, where they were sharing Ubers together. They were sharing, like, and that's the part I keep coming back to is, and I don't know if you can drop in on somebody's mind of, like, how do you confront the horrors and the pain you've caused somebody else in life?
Well, okay. I mean, there's a lot here. So I think, just to kind of go back to where you started, and I'm sure you understand this, there's obviously no one right answer for everyone. Different environmental factors are going to hit people differently based on genetics, based on, so many different things. But, as far as your question around Raquel and Ariana, my kind of first intuitive sense of it is that there is something in Raquel, that is deeply competitive with other women. And I get this potential feeling that there's something very exciting to her about to your point, getting chosen by the man of the house. And I kind of feel Tom, even though he's not actually married to Ariana, even though they don't have kids, I feel him kind of representing the dad of the house, the man of the house, and her kind of orienting to him as kind of like, I've talked about this on Instagram, I talked about this on my podcast, but her kind of orienting as the naughty little girl, who lures the man of the house into her bed. And kind of feeling a sense of power there. And I do feel like there was some sort of competition set up between Raquel and the woman, whoever that is. Again, I don't know her history. I don't know if we're talking about her actual adopted mom or bio mom. I don't know if we're talking about peers and, the pageant system or whatever, but some sort of competitive in this place where she has to disown vital aspects of herself, that there is some sort of competition that plays out where she gets to know her own power and her own worth in competition to the other woman. And so there's something about, if I can kind of lure the man of the house into my bedroom away from her, she's the dumb one. She's the helpless one. She's the sucker. I'm actually the powerful one. So, if I follow this, if there is an inner conflict in Raquel around, like, wait a second, I'm actually this big, bad, powerful woman who's got all this energy, and I want to go out there.
Yeah, you guys think you're taking care of me, but you, like, look what I'm doing. Like even like Sheena, like, taking care of her and calling her, like, little sister and all that. Like, you guys all think I need taken care of, and you're doing all of these things for me, but look at what I'm doing.
Exactly. And it's like, and I think that's sort of where the rage comes from. It's like, yeah, this powerful energy has to be driven underground because people aren't willing to, like, meet me here, or, whatever. I can't have all this energy, or else I'm going to risk rocking the boat, or I'm going to have to experience painful disconnection. To your point, yeah, let me wield it in this really kind of covert, unconscious way where I get to experience my own power. I get to take what I'm quote unquote owed, and I get to do it in this really sort of secret, exciting way that, yeah, on some level, I feel entitled to this. Like, no one's had to answer for what they shut down in me. Why should I have to answer for what I'm doing?
I really, that really makes a lot of sense to me. I just, it would be interesting if next season Raquel comes back. She's got a completely different voice. She's completely settled in. She's like shooting fire. She's shooting electric bolts from her, lightning from her fingers. Like, I wonder if there is this thing, because I keep thinking about that thing of they've been in an eight month affair without anybody knowing. And then, so they've already caught up to what they've been doing. I think the outrage is that we're catching up to what they've had 8 months to realize. So that is where a lot of and especially from Ariana, of course. And I know there was a little bit of suspicion from the cast, which we're going to see in a couple of the episodes coming up, but they were still told that there's nothing there. Don't pursue it. I swear to God, it's just a friendship. So I just think that thought of, they don't realize what's happening, and they have a very different view on it because they've lived in it for so much longer than we have, or Ariana has.
And I think, well, and also to go back to your question about how to support Tom, if, like, he were here right now, I mean, I think the big thing for him is we would really have to go back to that moment of decision where, I was saying this earlier, he had a choice. He could have gone, obviously, to Ariana rather than having an affair. He could have gone to her and said, look, this relationship isn't working for me. These are the issues. We either need to work on this or I'm gone. And I know he's going to have excuses about why he couldn't and why he didn't. So for me, the work would be like, no, we need to support you to understand. Again, like I was saying before, you are responsible for your own choices, Tom. I don't give a shit if Ariana's depressed. I don't care if her grandmother died. She's just ultimately, I really believe this about Ariana. She's a strong woman and she's going to survive. So we need to bring you back to the moment where you made that choice and really start getting clear on why did you make that choice and what would it have meant for you to come clean and be honest about where you were, because you're saying it was for Ariana's benefit, but it was actually for your benefit. On some level, it was more comfortable for you.
Dude, why? And by the way, we see this in Summer House. We see this with a lot. We see this in Real Housewives of Miami. What is it? And I've been like this before, not necessarily with this cheating aspect, but with other aspects of my life where I've been like, I can't do this right now because it would hurt this other person so much. But when you really break down that thought, it's a selfish thought because you're saying, I don't have the strength in myself to deal with somebody else's pain. Exactly. I want to keep on the life I'm living and not have to slow down to absorb somebody else's pain that is going to be caused by this. And I think we see this again and again. What is it about men sometimes? I hate to typify, but you notice it with men more than women. 1,000 cases is that it seems like we find it very hard to have the tough conversations.
Well, again, it's going to be different for different people depending on their history. I think for Tom, what comes up for me, I think there's two things. I think
if you're on Bravo, let's say maybe not all men. If you're on Bravo, you're going to be you're a guy.
I think there are two strong things that sort of come forward for me. I think one, I think on a certain level, Tom wanted to nurture this grudge. Like, I think there's an unresolved rage in him. And I think there is a part of Tom that wants to punish the woman. And so I think in some unconscious place where he feels like Ariana kind of fucked with him, I think part of him probably didn't want to have this honest conversation because then it would rob him of the opportunity to kind of act something out that an unconscious part of him wants to act out. Now, and okay, there's actually three things. So the second thing that's coming to me is, let's just say hypothetically he has that conversation with Ariana, and let's just say she doesn't meet him there, and she's like, you know what, Tom, I can't be the girlfriend you want me to be. We should break up and sort of move on. I just feel, and this is sort of connected to what I just said, I could feel that for him, it would enrage him. Like, I can hear the voice that says, oh, okay, so you used me, you got what you wanted out of me, and now you're like leaving me behind. So there's sort of kind of like a power play here too, of like, I'm not going to give you the opportunity to say no to me and make me feel even more used than I already feel. And the third thing that I feel from him too is a deep distrust in love. And I really feel that. Like, I feel like, with Ariana, because Ariana is emotionally intelligent, and
she really is. Like, I've even had some conversations with her since this is, and it's wild how, I mean, I don't want to use the word resigned, but there is this inner strength that I'm shocked about that seems like I would just be, the sky is falling, da da da. And she's like, no, like, it's very interesting. She's like one foot in front of the other.
Well, yeah, I have something to say about Ariana and the way that I experience her. But just to finish up the Tom thoughts, yeah, I feel like Ariana is someone who could potentially actually meet him in relationship. And I think Tom has emotional intelligence. And I think that's why we like them. Of all the people on this show, they felt like the most kind of like real functional heart-based couple. And so I do feel like in Tom, in this place where historically he felt fucked with somewhere around his heart, I think there's a deep distrust around really showing up in a mutual, reciprocal, loving relationship. And so I could see part of him being scared to actually bring his truth out and to actually be met by someone who says, you know what, Tom, you've got some points. Let's, whatever we got to do, let's go to therapy. Let's work on it. Let's open up our sex life, because then suddenly he has nowhere to hide. Right. So I think these are three sort of different but connected reasons why someone like him might pull back from. It's like, once he has that conversation with Ariana, his skin's in the game. And if this is a guy who's been committed to secrecy, to withholding, to hiding out of a sense of safety, he's kind of shining a light on his hiding spots by having that conversation. So, yeah, I think there's multiple reasons why he would in this case, he would pull back from just saying, hey, Ariana, we need to talk. Do you want to hear what I have to say about Ariana, or are we going to say something?
Hell yeah, I do. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always just, it's interesting because I've actually seen flashes of how my experience of her essence in some of the previews and whatnot, but I've always just felt like she's got a warrior inside of her. To me, it's so interesting to me that she talks about like feeling depressed a lot. Because I just think she's got such strong warrior energy in her that wants to move. So that moment in the mid-season trailer where we see her screaming Raquel, I'm like, that's the Ariana I've always seen. And even this last episode where she just finally snapped at James and she was like,
we're done.
I was like, that's the Ariana I've always sensed. And I've just gotten this, feeling for her. My general experience of both depression and anxiety in people that I work with is that it tends to be really strong currents of energy that want to move through someone that's not getting expressed and embodied. A lot of times, like righteous rage. And so it gets literally depressed, and then someone becomes depressed or they becomes anxious. So I've always just felt with Ariana, like there's so much powerful currents of energy that want to move through you. And just some sort of feeling like she learned early on, I'm not allowed to have all these strong, powerful voices that want to move through me, and kind of feeling like, I wonder if this is manifesting in depression, feeling shut down. And so I've always felt like, oh man, if I could work with Ariana, I would just want to support her to have all this vital energy that wants to move through it. That again, I feel like we're starting to see it this season. But so when you say like she feels so strong, I'm like, it's not a surprise to me because she feels like an embodied warrior to me.
Well, and we talk about blocks in our lives, but potentially, and these are the things where you don't realize sometimes, in the moment, but Tom potentially was a block in her life. And I
Oh, for
think with
sure.
removing that block, there's going to be so much creative energy that I can
Yeah.
already feel spilling out. There's such a goodwill towards her. And she's one of the other people, and this opens something, but, the commerce around Vanderpump Rules now.
I know.
Everybody's making a shirt, every cast member's doing a pod, da 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 da. And Ariana's one of those people that was really just like, I really thought amazing. She was staying off social media at first. She was letting everybody else, do their thing, not releasing a statement. Tom released two. And I thought that was very different as opposed to other cast members. But when you're going through something this real, and like I said, I think she's going to potentially get it over a little quicker because when you break something this hard, like Tom did, when you have it come out this way, you fracture that relationship so brutally that it snaps the bone completely instead of hanging on like a lot of relationships do for years. Like it kind of freed her to be able to potentially move on quicker. I don't mean with another guy or girl. I just mean move on, mentally quicker because something is so horrifying, it breaks it completely. Like there's no chance of them getting back.
Yeah, well, I also, I've been so aware too. She's in the flurry of the show right now, so I really kind of wonder what's going to happen once the season's done airing. The dust settles, and then she really kind of has to be with the experience. I imagine there's going to be a lot more to process, kind of on the back end, a few months from now. But yeah, no, I think Tom in some ways really did do her a favor because he really revealed himself and he revealed what was going on underneath the surface in such a big, bold way. And I'm sure there's stuff here for her to look at. I'm sure there were compromises she was making in the relationship. I'm sure there were boundaries she was betraying in the relationship. I'm sure there were things she wasn't fully maybe letting herself take in as far as like ways and places she was unhappy. So I think the good news for her, she gets to really look at, holy shit, like I was maybe telling myself one thing about all this, not realizing that, this was running so much deeper than I realized. And hopefully, I think for any of us in a situation like this, we walk away from it kind of saying, next time, I'm not like I'm not like ignoring the red flag. I want to be clear, this isn't blaming her for what happened. She's obviously the innocent party in terms of Tom and Raquel's deception in the affair. But I personally do come from this belief that we are co-creating our own realities. And I think if there is something in Ariana that's pulled back from the expression of her own huge, powerful warrior energy, on some unconscious level, there was a payoff to this relationship where she's with this man child who, is kind of like, sort of more into himself than maybe her. Like, there's a way that they worked for each other. And yes. I think to your point, now that they're creating space in their respective lives, and there's an opportunity here for both of them to look at, like, wait, what did we co-create here and why? Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Tom's necessarily in a place where he's really willing to look at what he's done and why.
So does that mean he's going to keep repeating the same mistake again? Because then if I was Raquel and I was really thinking about it, like, oh boy, he's been in one long relationship ever before Dodie. Like there's never been a time where Tom has been single. He just goes from relationship to relationship. I just wonder if he is not facing any, like even the thing I said the other day, I think on Instagram, I said, listen, whatever you want to think, they're together still, but I don't know a thing in the world, but I would imagine maybe now's not the time to pursue this relationship at this moment. And you need to actually have some self-reflection about why you did the things you did. So you can make sure if you really do care about this relationship with Raquel, that you're setting yourself up for success and not just to shut us up. You're like, don't be in a relationship just to prove us wrong,
Yeah, no, I mean, it looks that he's doomed to repeat patterns over and over because look at what's happened. I mean, if you go back and rewatch, I mean, this is in many ways, this is what sort of happened with Kristen, where it's like, oh, she doesn't touch me, we don't have sex, he cheated on her, it was a 2-day thing rather than just a one-time thing. It's like there's a pattern here. It's like he starts feeling unappreciated in a relationship. And rather than dealing with it in a healthy way, he sort of gets his little, his little dig in by cheating. He gets his sort of bid for power in sort of a cruel way. And then he's kind of shamed for it. And then it's like, okay, I got to be the good boy. In seasons past, he's like putting together the IKEA table, trying to be the good boy who's like making it up to Kristen. I mean, again, there's this split between like, the good boy who's like, trying to prove himself to Lisa Vanderpump and, I don't know, like hugging his mom. And it's like trying to do the right thing. But there's obviously this other side to him. Is that sound getting picked up?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
I can. Yeah.
There's obviously this other side to him that's enraged about having to be the good little boy. And like I said, feeling used, feeling unappreciated. I mean, you see it play out with Lisa Vanderpump. It's like, no matter how much I try to prove myself to you, as part owner of TomTom, you don't take me seriously. You still make jokes at my expense. Like, you won't see what I'm trying to create here. I mean, less so now because there's been more focus on Schwartz and Sandy's, but when it was about TomTom, you could see how hurt and devastated he would get when Lisa wouldn't kind of recognize what he was trying to bring to the table. And I just feel like this is sort of the pattern in the loop that he's locked into, where it's like with Tom, it's like, okay, I'm gonna try to prove myself. I'm gonna be extra. I'm gonna be the good boy. Do you love me now, Mom? Do you love me now, Mom? Do you love me now, Kristen? Do you love me now? And then it's like something doesn't get seen and he's outraged about it. And I think that's where like the anger comes in. I think that's where the cruelty comes in. I think that's where punishment comes in. And even with Lisa Vanderpump, there is some truth to like the idea that she's using Tom and Tom, as the face of their bar. We're giving you part of the bar. You kind of love what you have to give, but also, oh, now, boys, you're so silly. You don't know what you're doing. We're going to make jokes at your expense. We're going to kind of poke at you. There's with them. And I can kind of feel Tom sort of like, it's just this push-pull, this inner conflict. I want you to love me. I fucking hate you for fucking with me. I just think there's these really sort of warring threads and voices around his relationship to women, including his own relationship to, I think, the woman inside him. Because I do experience him as this very fluid guy,
And everybody, it's so funny how we like, I do Tom as I have like, cause I always pick up on a little lisp he has. He's like, he's always like, come on, Ariana, they're just believing I'm going to rock this tonight. There's like this tiny little lisp that I exaggerate that like you can really barely pick up on, but it's so interesting. Everybody, like, I always think it's so interesting how we've grown and some people haven't grown, because like somebody's like, yeah, him and Schwartz, they should just go and have sex with each other because they love you. And I'm like, this is such a sixth grade joke. Like, guys, I really don't give a rip. I mean, I hope he's bisexual. I don't care. But like, also, this is not even what we're dealing with. That's always like the base level joke of anything, of like, give me a break. And by the way, Schwartz is so lazy that he'll just go along with anything. But I mean, by the way, have you ever dropped in on Schwartz? Is there a lot of turmoil in him? Is it even worth it to drop in on Schwartz?
Well, I mean, I've always been very tapped into his rage. I mean, he's just got a ton of rage, and he's just so passive aggressive. And I've been saying for years, that he totally gaslights Katie. And yeah, I mean, everyone sees it now. I mean, he's sort of the rageful guy who gets a lot of mileage out of playing dopey, and he gets away with a lot. I will say it was interesting to me in this last episode when they kind of cross-cut between him putting on his projector and then Raquel putting on her projector. I did have this moment where I was like, in a really sick and twisted way, they kind of are right for each other, because they're both so passive aggressive and they both infantilize themselves that there's this kind of like surface dopey sweetness that masks like these deeper reservoirs of dark waters. Yes. And I'm like, maybe they are the two who should have been a couple after all. It's like, maybe if they just kind of exist on that surface level of like, pretending that they're nothing but, strobe lights and apple pie.
That's all we are, Jaime, is just strobe lights in these worlds. Like, but I think it's interesting that thought. I've been playing around with the thought lately of when you get on a reality television, you almost have Arrested Development of the year that you become famous in reality TV, is that you almost encase yourself in some sort of carbonite, where Sandoval is still in this, in his late 20s, getting ripped, like cheating, doing all of these wild things. And he's never had to grow further than that. And even when like certain people like Katie finally decided that was enough for her. Katie made a really tough, strong decision for herself last year with getting a divorce because you knew Schwartz was never going to do that. And even that you see has paid dividends for Katie in a lot of different ways. But Schwartz is still hitting that same button of the, infantilization of himself and wanting people to pity him and feel bad for him.
Well, and especially with this show, I mean, I'm still, because again, I'm kind of doing a curated rewatch in preparation for future Sandoval episodes. And, it just really struck me how, what Lisa Vanderpump invited these kids, at the time they were kids, what she invited these kids into, it really in some ways kind of set them up to fail, because it's like, I'm inviting you onto a show whose success is going to thrive on you guys being messes, on you guys fucking up, on you guys not having your lives together. And even though on one level I'm silently encouraging this. I want you guys to behave this way because this is what makes our show successful. Then I'm going to kind of sit here though on camera and tisk you and talk about how disappointed I am.
Behave! Why can't you keep your bits to yourself? Ah.
Well, exactly. And so it's fascinating because I'm really taking that in, and I'm just saying, for me, I can't imagine having like a roster of employees who are in their mid to late 20s and playing that out with them on camera. Like, I would be aware of what I was doing. I would be aware of like, wait a second, like I'm inviting them on this show, like they're rewarded for how they behave, but yet now I'm kind of chastising them for it. And I just kind of feel the gaslighting bind that's there, where it's like she really did invite them into an arena where on one level you could say they've gotten so much out of it. Are they wealthier, more famous, and more successful in a certain type of way than they ever would have been otherwise? Probably for most of them, yes. But with Sandoval especially, I'm really asking myself, at what cost? Are these people, especially when I look at Tom Sandoval, and I'm like, looking at to your point, if this was a guy who could have gone one of two ways, and by the way, I've been unearthing past things, like past appearances and whatnot, and it is funny because literally 4 years ago, when I was on Bit Sesh talking about Vanderpump Rules, I said, I think Tom Sandoval is at a crossroads where he's either going to have to choose between his commitment to secrecy, silent rage, and the part of him that's giving the big middle finger to the world, or stepping into manhood and humility. And I feel like, look, obviously he's making his choice, and he's not going down the road of maturation and humility. And even though he is responsible for his own choices 100%, I can't help but wonder, did the show, kind of help skew the scale to fall on that side, and had it not been for the show, would he be making different choices now? I mean, there's no way to know. It's You, Me, and Everywhere All at Once, or whatever that movie's called. There's so many infinite possibilities.
Everything, everywhere, you, me, Dupree, and everything, everywhere, all at once. Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with you completely. As we start winding down here, the last kind of idea I wanted to bring up with you, and we've mentioned it a second, is that where the audience comes into play. Now, we were also talking about all this goodwill out there for Ariana. There's equally a lot of a lot of bad thoughts towards Tom, myself included. And, when you're at this crossroads, and you have this opportunity for success, all of these side projects like your band and your restaurants and stuff like that is, when you have this much, I don't know what you would call it, karmic energy, or all of us now involved in the mix. Like, how does somebody rise above this much psychic energy going towards them that is mainly negative?
Well, that's what's so hot. That's why I get so sad about what's happening in the collective, because I just feel how it creates so little room or opportunity for these people who have made dark, destructive choices like Tom and Raquel to actually go and do their inner work. Because the fact is, I think you know as well as I do, there is nothing those two could say at this point that anyone is going to hear. Like, Tom could come out with the most heartfelt, deeply self-responsible account of like who I am, why I made these choices, my deep remorse. all of it. And everyone's just going to wait to pounce on it and tear it apart, right? So I guess
we're not ready to hear that, though. We're not ready to hear his big salvo, and I don't think he's ready to even say that yet.
No, of course not.
So I think those two things won't really happen for a while.
Which is why we really need to take a look at, like, as a collective, what do we get out of this? Like, because, I mean, I'm going to come back to your question in a moment, but one thing I've been circling back around to is I know you've been really uncomfortable with, like, the cruelty that you could feel in Tom and Raquel's decision. And one thing I wanted to say about all this is, yes, was there deep destructive cruelty in what they did? Absolutely. I also want to say we all have cruelty in us. Like, we all do. That's just part of being human. Like, none of us are exempt from cruelty. Now, do some of us go deeper and further with it? Absolutely. There's more I could say about that, but I want to say none of us are exempt from cruelty. And part of where I'm feeling the cruelty is in the voice in the collective that just wants to annihilate these two. Because the reality of the situation is, regardless of whether Tom and Raquel get burned at the stake or not, regardless of whether Ariana wears a great revenge dress or not, nothing is going to change what happened. Nothing is going to change what they did. And what I hear in you, Ryan, like, I hear you saying, I mean, what I hear underneath your anger, like when I hear you talk about, the shrooms you did with Sandoval and the experiences you had with him and the way you put him on a pet, like, it's painful. Like, there's pain there. Like, there's disappointment and there's sadness. And I just think a lot of this, I'm not speaking directly to you, I just think collectively a lot of this rage, I do think it safeguards us from kind of feeling maybe some of the more uncomfortable feelings on a deeper level. And I think on some level, it's easier to feel that kind of quick hit cruelty of, like, I want Tom and Raquel to pay. Let's go write a negative Yelp review. Down with their business.
Yeah, no, I was never for the Yelp
not.
reviews. Like, I'm down for a cruel meme, but I thought that was I even thought that was a bridge too far, where I was like, come on, guys. Like, I even knew how to pull it back there, but you're right. I think there is this thing of, we don't like to, I think it takes so much to really genuinely like somebody in this world, in this day and age. It really, for you, and especially on a reality television show where there's so many people that do abhorrent things, especially on Vanderpump Rules. Like DJ James Kennedy can't say crap because he's like says wild, mean shit every episode. And there's nobody that has a moral high ground really. But when you kind of give, like, I mean, listen, I was just there is this shock there, and there is this safeguarding of, like, damn, that really hurts, because it also points out the fact how you can be so, but you mentioned it, there's a lot of elements about Tom that you still, that are still there that you like. I think I'm finding it hard to pull those apart, because I'm thinking it's one big thing, and this dude, there's a thing where I thought he was just this amazing, nice guy that wanted everybody to have a good time, when now I'm looking at it from this different way of, oh, he just got off on being the person that we listened to. He got off on, there's a lot of complicated emotions that go into it, but it just makes me angry, because I'm just like, there's so many elements to this that would blow apart your own life, and you're not on TV.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I want to say. I mean, first of all, let me just say, from me to you, like, I just want to say, like, I get it. I mean, I never knew Tom personally, right? I've never met him. And I want you to know, Ryan, like, I was touched by him. Like, there's a lot about him that touched me. I talked about this on my podcast. Even just, the language of today. I'm a cis male who identifies as a man, but I remember when I was growing up as a kid, I really identified a lot more with girls, and I remember, like, wanting to dress up in girls' clothes and put on makeup. It's something I grew out of, but it was something that I really felt a lot of shame about. It made me feel weird. It made me feel different. And I talk about this because as an adult in 21, like, when I would see Tom as sort of a straight identified, man in a male's body, dressing up in drag and owning it, like, it moved me. I was like, wow, there's something he's embodying here that I feel like is giving me permission to, like, own these different kind of, like, non-binary aspects of myself. And So I say that because, again, I interpret all this stuff as information about a person's field. Again, everyone has a different perspective. For me, I do think there's something in Tom that is deeply complex and has the power to offer something that's healing for other people. I think he's a transmitter. I think he's very powerful energetically. So I just want to say to you, if I'm experiencing some level of medicine from Tom, not even knowing him, I can imagine for someone like you who's actually had personal experiences with him, you're going to feel that even more strongly. And I want you to know I have felt disappointed too. So yeah, I mean, I want to say, like, I'm deeply disappointed, and like, it makes me sad and it makes me disappointed, and I don't actually feel betrayed on a personal level, but I feel a
Yeah.
certain sense of betrayal, and I felt the same way about Jen Shaw because I felt her vulnerability first season of Salt Lake City, and I was one of the few people who kind of stuck up for her. It was like I actually kind of feel something human in her. So when those charges came out, I was like, damn, like.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed, you know?
Yeah.
So
And there's a disappointment in yourself too. You're like, oh wow, was I picking up on the wrong thing? I mean, I told Tom, and it wasn't about it wasn't about I just even thought the spirit of how he approached projects, not even in, like for you, it was like, gender bending to a degree and being proud of that as a straight male and like showing that you can do anything. But for me, it was always like he was doing these side projects and he was going at it with all his might. And to me, that was so inspirational because I was like, I'm doing something so weird. I'm doing a podcast about like reality shows, and it inspired me to be like, this is not what I expected to be doing with my life. And some people think this is so weird when I tell them about it, but I see somebody like that and go like, wow, he's going for these things that people initially make fun of, and then they're like, yeah, that's pretty cool all of a sudden. Like I that to me, I derived a lot of inspiration from, and I know I can hold on to that, but it's just hard because I think we and me have this thing of, I want there to be a perfect person. I want there to be, and that just doesn't exist.
Well, and I think you're speaking to something important, which is, yeah, then we get to look at what it brings up in us. So I hear you saying, maybe let me look at the place in me that wanted to put someone on a pedestal. And for me, and I talked about this on my podcast, I was really looking at as someone who, I mean, literally, like, so much of my content is about, like, me being the guy who calls people out like years before, like I've been saying, I don't trust Heather Gay from season 1. I've been saying, I don't trust Brittany Cartwright or Tom Schwartz since like back in, season 3 or 4 or whatever of Vanderpump Rules. What I've really been looking at that. It's like, what was it in me that but kind of chose to look the other way? Because there were places where I looked the other way. There were moments that registered, like when he didn't want to be with Ariana on, I think it was her birthday.
Yeah, you're talking about the
died.
bulldozer moment where he was like, there's a chance for me to go to Vegas and like do things with the bulldozer and smash cars. And she had mentioned like it was going to be a tough day for her, and he, it was like the most ridiculous. It's like, it was and by the way, I like when I interviewed him, I brought that moment up as like, haha, in retrospect, that was such a funny moment, but you're so great together. And now it was one of those things, there's a sign of like, that's who he is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I remember taking that in and being like, wait a second, this is dark. But for some reason, I don't know, and it's so not characteristic of me. I just kind of put it in a box somewhere. So I get to look at that. Like, what was it about Tom and my experience of Tom as a viewer that was skewing me to sort of look the other way? But I think the message I just want to say to you, and I think to all your listeners, is like, the place where I come from is just to welcome it all. And I think, the way I look at it is, I don't think you were wrong about the things that you saw in Tom and felt in Tom. And I think that's what makes this painful for me, is that I do think there are these beautiful aspects of him. And yeah, now my relationship to him as a viewer has changed. And the truth is, I do look at him differently, and I take a lot more seriously his capacity for dishonesty and destruction. And, for me, it's not that I'm coming from a place of vilifying him or demonizing him. It's just, this is what he's shown me. And yeah, so there's disappointment, there's sadness for him in the choices he's making in his life. There's sadness for Ariana and what she's going through. There's sadness I don't know, to me, it's just, there's sadness. And I think...
Yeah, there's sadness. And I think sometimes that gets misplaced as anger because that's an easier emotion to deal with than sadness sometimes. And anger, there's an activeness to anger. there's something that you can act upon, whereas sadness sometimes is very insular and isolating and lonely. But
Yeah.
anger, and especially shared anger, and I don't mean this is good. I don't think this is good, but it's something that I notice is that we have this, you have these social media outlets where you can just pile on, and like I always say this, like I'm always shocked. Like I'll make a meme that's like a cutting joke, but it's not nearly as cutting as the 90 comments underneath it that go completely so much further than I'm like, damn, what are you doing? But I made that forum.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's cruelty, right? So it's like everyone can sit here and judge Tom and Raquel for their cruelty, and their cruelty isn't okay. But when I look at that rush, and again, I'm not saying you, but it's like there's a flavor out there of let's annihilate them, let's take them down. And I think to your point, there's like a dopamine hit of like, if we can take them down hard enough and fast enough, we get to check a box and sort of feel better about all this. But
Yeah.
there's cruelty there. It's
Yeah.
cruelty. So we all have cruelty. So it's not to excuse what they did. Let's hold what they did, be honest about it. Jen Shah needs to go to jail and answer for her crimes. You do the crime, you do the time. Tom Sandoval, like he did the crime, he did the time, but we also don't need to make him into, I mean, I've literally seen people call them.
No, you were saying on your show, you're like, we're blaming them for the ozone layer. We're blaming them for we're blaming them for everything at this moment. And I mean, that's the one thing too, is that I hope, because the reunion's not going to air until the end of May, and I hope in this time, like I can't keep these feelings up. I can't keep, I'm dealing with tons of other things. And by the way, nobody's asking me to keep these feelings up, but it just, when you do something like this, I know like I'm drawn to do this stuff, but I can't keep this going for another month and a half. Like I can't, like I almost wish it was over this week so we could put it away, go see what the next couple of months bring. But I'm just like, how do we keep, but it'll be interesting. Maybe it's a positive thing and we can see how we can change our feelings, not change, but like accept our feelings, see how we move on from here. Because that's what I kept even thinking of, like, what is going to excite my brain as much as the Sandoval stuff? Like watching the other TV shows right now aren't hitting on the same level that Sandoval is, because it's skewed every one of my neurons and what to expect from a reality TV show.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's forced me to disengage a lot from social media because it was becoming too much for me. I was just like, this is just the energy around this is too much. It was actually like, it was dispiriting for me. It was demoralizing. For me, it was hard to see the rage, the aggression, the cruelty. I was like, there's a swarm of energy around this that I can't tolerate this too much. So I've actually kind of like muted a lot of stuff. And but I think to your point, maybe.
But by the way, but see, what you did is exactly smart. And I always tell the listeners that too. It's like, if always chase your bliss, always protect yourself as well. And don't, mute me, mute the mute whatever. It really is one of those really easy things that it's like not going to hurt the people that you think it is. Like, protect your own energy. I notice a lot of people, when they don't like something, they listen to it more or they interact with it more. And I have a lot of friends that will listen to podcasts that they absolutely hate. And they'll message me like, oh, this person's so dumb, but you're still listening. You're still listening. And that tells me something of like, well, because then I'll be like, man, should I try to be hated? Because it seems like a lot of like hate listens are out there. And I'm like, maybe that's a way to expand the audience, is just to get as many people to hate me as possible. But like, to me, there wouldn't be fun in that.
But again, so that's a great example. So there's the cruelty, right? They're hate listening because it feeds something in them that gets a charge and a rise out of like hating the person and then talking shit about them. And so again, I just say this to say we all have this in us. So if someone's sitting there saying like, I don't understand how Tom and Raquel could get off on doing something so horrible to Ariana, which again, by the way, they did do something horrible to Ariana, and I think there's something really there for them to look at. But, are you someone who hate listens to a podcast? You know what I mean? Like, I think there are all these places where we go in for the negative pleasure where something's being disowned in us. And I have to imagine if that person who's hate listening kind of really dropped in underneath that to find out, like, what's going on here on a deeper level, there probably is some unmet need in them that,
Jamie, it blows my mind because like I think you speak so clearly and so beautifully about a lot of these topics and very fairly, and I really shoot from the hip a lot of the times, and I basically do most episodes are with a comedic bent, but it is interesting because I can tell that the podcast is becoming more successful because I now get like not hate mail, but I'll get really strongly worded emails or something, and I like somebody wrote me like a diatribe, and by the second paragraph I'm like, I mean, this is really simple. Just don't listen to me. Like, I don't know. I mean, like, and by the way, I'm not even the smartest dude in the world, but I'm like, this seems really like an easy fix. Like, don't listen. The time that and I'm just always blown away because then I try to think about what that person's going through and what drove them to then write a very long multi-paragraphed email about something that I said or did. And it's always just very interesting to me. And that part of this is it scares me because but then at the same time, I do hate watch TV shows. I don't do it with podcasts, but I'll do it with TV shows sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think with that person who's writing you, it's like they want something to be seen and heard. That's kind of what I was saying with Tom, almost like, why would he do this affair rather than just coming clean with Ariana? Because I think there's a core rage in him that he wants to act out. He wants it to be like we're talking about with the, like off with their heads. He wants something to be nurtured. He thinks he's gonna like make someone pay a price, and it's kind of like, it reminds me of Meredith Marks. It's like, why does she hold on to these grudges? It's like, my feeling is there's some sort of unresolved rage in her that she's acting out in all these relationships because her inner child wants something seen or heard. And if she gives up her rage towards Lisa Barlow, it's like this feeling of, oh shit, this isn't getting seen or heard. So it's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like negative pleasure, holding on to the rage, fueling anger. We all have our places where we do this. And I just think, unfortunately, this is where Tom and Raquel did it. And the last thing I'll say, though, because I do want to speak to the depth, like we're saying, there's a real cruelty to what it was. This isn't just hate listening to a podcast. It's like really doing something vicious towards Ariana. So I
orchestrated almost.
And it's deep. It's not like, it's like breaking someone's heart. And I think that's part of what people are reacting to. So I want to acknowledge, obviously, this is deeper than hate listening to a podcast. And I can understand why for Tom and Raquel, they might not want to recognize this in themselves, because it's like, if I recognize this in myself, well, then I'm a horrible person. And what I would say to them and what I would say to your audience, I actually think, yes, I think they should feel the depth of their destruction. I think that's important for their, just even their relationship to themselves, atonement, making things right energetically. But I also think the depth of that viciousness, I think, mirrors the depth of their inner rage. And I think the depth of their inner rage mirrors what I would call the depth of their powerful energy. I just think these are strong individuals who have strong currents of energy that want to move through them. And that's why it's like these are deep wells that are inside these two. And that's why I would want to support them to know the depth of their cruelty, to know the depth of their rage, so that they can also feel the depth of their strong, powerful energy. So, because imagine if that same energy that went towards fucking with Ariana and fucking with the world, imagine if that went towards like something constructive.
Like a hit song for Tom Sandoval and the Most Extras. Imagine it could have been the song that saved the world, the We Are the World of the aughts.
Well, what I would say is maybe his energy would shift from a cheesy cover band into like Tom Sandoval writing his own original music, actually like getting his voice on point, being a talented musical artist. And I mean, you're sort of joking about it, but I kind of feel like creating healing music that has like a powerful vibration where he's inviting people into his complicated through the looking glass field. I mean, I totally can see Tom in his essence as like this sort of magician musician who's like writing about these sort of deep, powerful things.
Yeah, he has this gift where he makes people feel really loved. So if that's really, if you take that on the surface, that's a really powerful gift that he has. And, if he could really, there's a real positivity in that. I just think this potentially, it just feels like this would be the time to be alone and to really dive into that creativity and the well of pain and all of this stuff because like this could be such a creative time for him. And that's the other thing too, is that in most relationships, when you get caught cheating, you usually beg to get your partner back. And that's why this was very different, was that it wasn't like, let's get back together. It was like, yeah, this has been going on for a while. I think I'm in love,
Yeah, I think to your point, and you brought this question, and yeah, I think in an ideal world, Tom would get out of the public eye, like screw fame for the moment, go find real help to help him understand why he did what he did, get in touch with these core wounds, and then liberate his energy to go in constructive places. Because you actually just helped me get kind of actually even clear. What I would say is, I think this is really interesting. And I've actually said this before in reference to James Kennedy. I often think a lot of times the depth of someone's cruelty is actually also directly proportionate to the depth of love that they have to bring. And so I think that if Tom was really hurt in his heart, which is like, that's what I feel. I feel like he got kind of fucked with around the place of his heart. I think, that depth of punishing rage and cruelty is directly proportionate to how much love he actually has to give. And so that's where I feel my sadness, because I'm like, man, this could be going in such a different place if you just were willing to make different choices. But that's where free will comes in.
Jaime, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours like we just did. And this is, really, I needed this talk, actually. This is a great talk for me to have right now. And I think for you guys to listen to. But I want to know, if you want to keep that good feeling going, if you want to kind of look a little deeper than potentially I do a lot of the times, I think Deep Dive with Jaime Stein is the place to go to. Really start off with that Sandoval episode from a couple of weeks ago. And I know he's preparing a bunch of other episodes right now. So all you need to do is subscribe. That way it'll show up on your feed immediately when a new episode comes out. Also rate it 5 stars. You don't have to do that just on Apple Podcasts. You can do that now on Spotify as well. And, he's not releasing every day like I am. So you want to really make sure you subscribe and hit that 5 stars so you can get that kind of placement. I think, this is such an important piece of this conversation, so we don't get all like lopsided on just, you want to have all sides. Not that you're speaking for Raquel and Tom, but we want a deeper understanding of these things that we are so passionate about. Is there anything else that we can support you at? What's your website, by the way?
My website is hollywoodreadings.com. So yeah, if you're interested in my work, you can check it out there and email me. And then if you're on Instagram, definitely follow me on Instagram, Jaime Stein, JAMIESTEIN. As you mentioned, my podcast schedule does tend to be intermittent these days, but I'm recording a bunch more to get it back in regular rotation. But I always announce what I'm doing on Instagram, and there's also original content where I drop into people on Instagram. So it's a good little hub.
You guys, if you like amazing conversations, I'm telling you, this is really, it really sucks you in, and you sit there, you're shaking your head of like, yes, yes, yes. And I think that is so, so important for, the stuff that we so dearly love. So Jaime Stein, Deep Dive with Jaime Stein, and I'm going to put all of those things in the show notes. So make sure you go support. And Jaime, thanks again, man. By the way, I asked Sandra to reach out to Jaime. I'm like, yeah, I want him on. And he asked what he wanted to talk about. I was like, I don't care. I just want him on. Like, I'll talk about it. Like, we can talk about anything, so, but thank you for doing this again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. It's so fun to be with you. And your energy is infectious. So it's my pleasure. So thank you for having me.
So no more Shorts and Sandies, but we will do a sandwich at Something About Her when I'm back in Los Angeles.
Yeah, because they have drinks too, right?
Yeah, they have drinks too. It's a one-stop shop.
Is it open yet, or when's it opening?
No, not open, but I think in a couple months it'll be open.
All right. It'll be a plan before I leave LA.